Here we are with another edition of the Mic is Open with yours truly. And when we started this whole thing just a couple weeks ago, I told you there would be San Jose Sharks content because, of course, that is my day job as the Sharks pre- and post-game host on NBC Sports California. Well, this week, it's the NHL Draft. So we're going to turn on the neon light, the teal neon light, and we are going to get deep into it with Gabe Foley, the head amateur scout of Recruit Scouting. He has these great player cards. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about who he really likes in this draft, what he really likes about the Sharks prospect pool, and when we're going to wrap it up, as we always do, with some dad advice. Now, Gabe is not a dad himself, but he's been around a lot of hockey dads through his career, through his playing days, and he has advice for hockey dads as we wrap it up. So that's all coming your way on this edition of The Mic is Open. Let's go. All right, Gabe Foley joining me now, an NHL scout, a young one making his way through this. And I think it's good that we get more voices when it comes to NHL scouting and NHL player profiles, whatever it may be, because yes, there's guys that are long time established, but there's going to be new waves. And so let's introduce a new voice. And I love what you're doing with the player cards. So here you are on The Mic is Open, also going to be used with NBC Sports Digital. And first and foremost, what we do around here on this podcast is I open the mic up for you. Just if you need anything to get off your chest, here it is, Gabe. This is your opportunity.
I love the opportunity here because I have got to emphasize Macklin Celebrini's the next NHL superstar. You're telling me we got 25 goals, 2 assists short of 40 assists, and even play in more than 70 games this season. Then what does he do after that? Goes to the World Championship, pots another 6 points in 8 games. San Jose has a superstar, a dynasty-defining piece in Macklin Celebrini, and I couldn't be more excited to emphasize how good he is and to be here to talk about the club that's going to make him into the Cup winner one day.
And this is, at the time we're recording this is coming off the Calder Trophy announcement this week. Obviously, Lane Hutson, deserving because what he did kind of towards the end of the year really put the Habs into the playoffs, and it was a historic season. But I think down the road, like you're talking about, Macklin Celebrini 5 years from now, there is going to be no question who was the best player from this class. And I don't know if really overall, they're two different classes. Lane Hutson was a little bit older, but down the road, this Calder race, we're going to look back and say, okay, third in the voting, that seems a little bit off. And so, Gabe, we'll come back to Macklin and we'll come back to Will because I know you know them both well from their days over in your neck of the woods in Chicago, Illinois area. But let's start with what's coming up here shortly, the NHL Draft 2025. There is no Macklin Celebrini by all accounts in this draft. I don't, maybe I'm generalizing from the reports and the things that I'm seeing, but there's no Macklin Celebrini in this draft, correct?
Correct, yeah.
But there is some good top-end talent. And so the Sharks are picking at number 2. They have a lot of pieces already in their prospect pool. But I ask you, if you're GM Mike Greer at the number 2 pick, where do you go here on June 27th?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, one way or another, it's either going to be Matthew Schaefer or James Hagens going to Long Island with that first overall pick. And I would love to speak the praises of James Hagens here. Mike Greer is a buddy of James Hagens' agent. They go back, certainly a lot of close colleagues with Hagens already in the Sharks pipeline. But let me say, I don't think that there's been a better opportunity to really staple your franchise moving forward than San Jose has with drafting Michael Misa here at number 2. Michael Misa is a phenomenal goal scorer. He does it all well. He gets into the zone. He works off the board. He finds the pockets of space in and around defenders, and his shot is second to none in this draft class. Scored at almost a goal per game pace in the OHL this season, a scoring total that we haven't seen since the likes of Patty Kane, John Tavares, Connor McDavid. I mean, these OHL superstars. So I would love to hype up Hagens. I'll certainly, I think, get my opportunity to at some point. But when you look at a team like San Jose, you see the setup men that are there. You guys have Will Eklund, you have Macklin Celebrini, you have Will Smith. Add the gut punch. Bring in the Jumbo Joe to go with the Patrick Marleau. Give me Michael Misa to the Sharks at number two.
I think overall, the Sharks can't really go wrong here at number two.
Yeah.
They're in a good spot. If Schaefer drops to number two and dropping one spot, that's a huge drop. Everyone get worrisome. It's not. And if Schaefer's there, that's great because they might need a number one defender. But like you said with Misa, that's kind of more so the opportunity that if the draft goes as all the experts say, that Misa's going to be there. And then you have Macklin Celebrini and Michael Misa right down your middle. You also could have Will Smith. Will Smith is going to get the opportunity to center next season to begin the year. Mike Grier has already said that. That is a dynamic three-headed monster that you could have. And you also think that Michael Misa stepping in behind Macklin Celebrini takes a little bit of pressure off him if he does try and make that jump immediately.
Yeah, which I say by all accounts he can. I mean, unprecedented CHL scoring, at least for the 2020s. And Misa's already got the size. He's got the heft. He's got the strength. Performed admirably at the combine. I think he's a really interesting fit in what the Sharks could be next year. Because you're right, he can be that 2C that not only takes pressure off of Celebrini and not only gives you a bulky body behind Celebrini, who certainly took his beatings this year. But Misa can play on the wing just as well. He can be that top line right wing to go with Eklund and Celebrini. Of course, we said the same thing about Will Smith all year long. And so, just the flexibility of having center or wing capability out of a dynamic offensive piece, whether it's Misa, whether it's Smith, I think that gives San Jose a top line that they can be proud of moving forward and one that they can change and tweak and, maybe even go as far as using game script to determine who's out
Yeah.
there with Macklin, who's the one shooting the puck, and what do we need at any
Yeah.
given point.
Kind of like we've already seen with the Oilers where
Yeah.
they break up Draisaitl and McDavid most of the time, but then when they need to lean on those two guys, they load them up. And we kind of saw it at the end of last year where Macklin and Will were playing together a lot, but down the road, that's not the Sharks' hope that they're on the same line. The hope is that they're on two different lines and maybe have to load them up when they really need a goal or something. So we've sung Michael Misa's praises, dynamic goal scorer, having historic years, exempt status in the OHL, but is there question marks about this player?
You know what? There are question marks about how he can move a line forward in the NHL. For all of his benefits, he got a lot of space moving through the neutral zone. He had kind of a gritty right wing in Christian Epperson, another top draft name who I think could land in the second or third round. And, that goes a long way. It makes it easier to score near that goal per game pace when you got a buddy that's clearing the pockets for you, that's giving you the puck, dropping it behind him as you're gaining the zone. So, there are going to be questions. And Michael Misa had questions facing him last season as well when he didn't pop quite like everyone expected him to. But I was on his bandwagon last year. I'm on his bandwagon again this year. Misa's not going to be number one on my board because I know one of these other players quite a bit better than I know Misa. But I think for all intent and purposes, he has star potential in the NHL, high end goal scoring potential in the NHL. And if that doesn't come along next year, if he's not even in the show next year, maybe he's got to grow. Maybe he doesn't make the team out of training camp. I think it's going to come along in due time, certainly as he adds more power and strength.
It also helps for the Sharks that they probably got good looks at him because Chernyshov was also on his wing throughout the second half of last year. And so when they're going to go look at their own prospect, they're obviously seeing Michael Misa. So I'm sure Mike Grier and his development staff, his scouts have. So we have Michael Misa. Matthew Schaefer is also a name at the top. We anticipate he's either going one. I like what you said about James Hagens because I think the Long Island thing, I think it's being discounted a lot by certain
Yeah.
people where it's like, oh, you can't take him because he's not better than X or that's their prognosis. But it's not like Long Island is a place where NHL guys are like, I want to go there.
Yeah.
So if you can draft a guy who's already gone on record to saying like his goal is to bring a Stanley Cup to Long Island, why not risk that? Because it's not like you're talking about a player in James Hagens who isn't a top five talent at the bare minimum, right? Like the bare minimum, he is probably a top five talent. So why not take the hometown kid? And so here you are, Gabe. I know you're very high on this player. Here is your opportunity to talk about James Hagen, who maybe 13 months ago, 14 months ago, he was the number one overall prospect heading into this latest season.
Yeah, absolutely. Unquestioned number one overall headed into the year. And he gained that status after beating Nikita Kucherov's record for scoring at the U18 tournament in 2024. That was a record that Hagens broke in the U17 tournament the year before as well. Dominated internationally. And quite frankly, I mean, certainly Sharks fans know it as well as anyone, but Hagens was the successor to Mackie Celebrini in handling Cole Iserman. An interesting and dynamic scorer, but one that needs a lot of help. And after Celebrini moved to Chicago and then college, it was Hagens who stepped up and kept Iserman scoring hot enough that he, still went in the top 20 of his draft year. A lot has been made about Hagens, right? A
Yeah.
lot has been questioned about his size. He's the only member of the top five, maybe even the top 10, who comes in below 6 feet tall. A lot has been made about his scoring. He didn't jump off the page like Celebrini did with Boston University. Instead, Hagens only scored 37 points in 37 games with Boston College. But I would kneecap both of those by saying, well, first and foremost, with 37 points, Hagens contributed to 30% of Boston College's total goals. That might seem like a scant number, but it's really only 4% less than
Yeah.
Celebrini contributed to with his Hobie Baker winning season at BU. He was at 34% with BU. Lane Hudson, in his 2 years at BU, contributed to 31%, 32%. Cole this year was at 32. I'm speaking in percentages and a lot of numbers, but I think it's important to emphasize that Hagen's contribution to Boston College's top line were impressive. He filled a tough role behind Will Smith and he filled it beautifully. Boston College's top line actually scored 4% more of the team's goals this year than they did last year, even despite Will Smith posting an insane season with the Eagles. So,
I still can't
uh,
believe Will Smith wasn't like the top three finalist for the Hobie Baker. That was still crazy to me that
yeah,
he just didn't get there for that year that he had. And you're talking about Hagens. I think he also is hurt because of what Macklin Celebrini did as a 17
yeah,
year old. And so it's like, oh well, he didn't do that. But we're seeing that Macklin Celebrini. Now we're going to revise history. Is going to go down as a great pick and maybe one of the top first overall picks in a long, long time. So I think you're onto something. I think also when you listen to other people like yourself, other scouts, they say, oh, well, he has the best offensive talent, no doubt. Okay, well, if he has the best offensive talent, that's someone you probably want. I
yeah.
don't care if you don't think he scored enough goals. He was still a teenager. He still has the best offensive talent, but you're like, ah, well, he's just got a lot of offensive talent and he's small. If you give him 2 more inches, then he's not. And you never know. He's an 18-year-old kid. Maybe he gets that extra inch and goes somewhere. When we are talking about Hagens, though, is he a fit for the Sharks? I know Mike Greer has said he wants to get bigger. I personally, as much as I kind of am with you, where I think he is going to be a dynamic scorer in the league, I don't know if he's the right fit for the Sharks if he's there at 2, which likely, I don't know. He's probably going to be there at 2. And so the Sharks going to make some picks. But could you see him if for some reason he slid a little bit? The Sharks do have a late first that maybe they package and get back up. Either way you look at it, is Hagens any option for the Sharks, or is it a redundancy that they might already have?
Yeah, well, you mentioned, Mike Greer's focus on getting bigger. I'll say Hagens might not be 6 feet tall, but the kid's jacked. He's been jacked for a long time. He's going to come into an NHL weight room and add some bully weight onto him. So I think we can, cast away those concerns. I do think he's a special player. You watch him play, you see that he thinks the game slower, more monotonous than the peers around him. He's able to decipher these split-second decisions as if he had all day to make them. And he does that every single shift. So certainly I think an impactful player, a special player. And you mentioned at the top, San Jose can't go wrong here. You got a incredible goal scorer in Michael Misa. James Hagens, I think, would fit beautifully into how the Sharks have utilized Will Smith, how they've utilized Macklin Celebrini. These aren't big guys. They aren't huge, but they're guys that know how to drive the puck down through the defenders, blow by anyone in their way, and create havoc in front of the net. So, do I think that Hagens could reach his star potential in San Jose? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think he would be a golden second option behind Macklin Celebrini. But in whatever hypothetical world that Michael Misa goes one, and he's not the option that I would pick for San Jose, what an interesting conversation it becomes between Schaefer and Hagens. Yeah, San Jose has Sam Dickinson, a phenomenal draft prospect in his own right, just had a Memorial Cup winning season in London. But the idea of having Dickinson and Schaefer manning that defensive group for the next decade. And you got Luca Cagnoni, Mukamadulin. I'm butchering his name, I'm sure. Uh,
Mukmadulin. Yeah,
there we go.
he's coming. He's coming off his shoulder injury, but he's coming. And they have
Yeah.
the thought is the defense isn't where the forward group is, which is true, but it's not like they haven't done
Oh,
anything back there. Like they have guys and Dickinson, like you're talking about, we're going to get into their overall pool. And so no, Matthew Schaefer would add something there. It would be crazy to see if they could really fill this whole thing out. We're going to find out, right?
yeah.
June 27th, we find out what the Sharks are going to do, where they're going to load up. I am kind of with you where you just keep loading up the forward group, kind of what the Oilers tried to do, what the Blackhawks did with Taves and Kane, and you just keep doing that because eventually you're going to get some defenders. They got Mook Madulin, who's big. Dickinson looks like he's only getting better. Like he was the fourth or fifth defender drafted last year, and he looks like he might be one of the more ready ones at this point. So they have options,
Yeah.
and Macklin Celebrini allowed them to have options this draft. So aside from the Sharks, Gabe, where do you think of this entire draft as a whole right now? This is my last question about this draft is the depth of this draft. A lot of them talk about is maybe it's not that good, that maybe next year's better. But what is your thought on the whole depth of talent here in 2025?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it did look like a softer draft for much of the year. Even guys like Brady Martin potentially breaking into the top 10 or by some rumors, maybe even into the top five would come as a surprise when we know that, guys like Will Smith fell in their draft, guys like Frankie Nazar or Logan Cooley were pushed back. I'm only citing NTDP guys because I've picked my camp.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think this 2025 class is stouter than it's being made out. There's talent to be gained in the second and third rounds. There are pros to be had. And really interestingly, I've heard over and over again from the team sources that I have that this is the class of overage talents. I
Mhm.
mentioned Christian Epperson, he was eligible for last year's draft. Charlie Serrato out of Penn State University, also a popular overage candidate. And then there's even guys like Ethan McKenzie, defender in the WHL, or Ludwig Johnson, defender playing in Switzerland's pro leagues who I did not know last year. I can be fully transparent about that, but their play this year demanded that attention. And that's really what we're seeing throughout this draft class. There are going to be names that a shrewd scout is going to target in these middle rounds, and they're going to turn into pros.
Yeah, I think you can always say whatever you want about the draft talent. you just never know, right? Guys are going to pop that weren't expecting to pop. Guys aren't going to pop who are expecting to pop. You just never know. And a lot of it comes down to your development plan and how these guys take to it. Because also at a certain point, when this becomes your job, it's a whole different ball game than, oh, I'm doing this because I'm really good at it. I'm a student athlete. I get to do a bunch of different things. But when it becomes your job, and that's one thing you heard from Macklin and Will throughout the years, like, oh, this is our job now. There's no more schooling. We do this 24 hours a day or whatever it may be, 18 hours a day, whatever it is. But it's a totally different ball game, and you can't always project that out, right? You don't know how some guys are going to deal with becoming a pro and all that. Now let's transition. San Jose Sharks prospect pool, by any account, is a top 2 at the very least. It's probably the top right now. They're just so deep. You have guys that are 10 to 15 that would be in the top 5 for other other prospect pools. When you look at the San Jose Sharks, their slogan is "The future is teal." What do you see when you look at the Sharks prospect pool as a whole picture?
Yeah, hard not to see the glimmer up top, really. The performances that we've seen out of Celebrini and Smith are incredibly encouraging, as I said right at the top there. I also think that William Eklund, Eklund was a guy that I had #1 overall in his draft year. I thought he was the best forward out of his class, and now he's a 40 assist guy. He's a 40 assist player. I mean, you can't beat that. So much shining piece, or so many shining pieces there at the top. Askarov, another really exciting one. Sam Dickinson, I already spoke to, but San Jose is interesting not because of those top pieces. Quite frankly, I think they all pan out. I have confidence in
Yeah.
all of them. Maybe that's my own naivety. San Jose is interesting because of these sleepers that they have. They have guys like Colin Graff, who might not project into the top 6 one day. But hey, if you told me in 10 years from now that Colin Graff has scored 20 goals a couple times in the NHL, I wouldn't be surprised. You have guys like Joey Muldowney,
Mm.
who was just far and away, if you ask me, UConn's best player this year. The driving piece of their top line, the engine that could in a lot of different ways. He's a small guy, but he's added size, he's added bulk. You know, there's upside there, there's promise there, even if he doesn't project into that top 6. And then right in the middle of them, shining pieces on top, tons of sleepers below. We got guys like Igor Chernyshov, who looked every bit like a pro player in his draft year, got injured for a prolonged period, and then came back and scored at an unprecedented rate in the OHL. I mean, insane stuff. In the second half of the year, too, and right across the league from him was Quentin Musty, who's big, he's strong, he's, dirty in the ways that you want him to be dirty, and he's got a rocket shot. So I can't get over this San Jose pool. I think from top to bottom, they're interesting pieces, pieces that would make a scout think. Even on defense, guys like Leo Salin Wallenius are
Hmm.
top pieces for their international club. Even Eric Polkamp was a player that David Carl, who many, proclaim is the best coach outside of the NHL. Well, Polkamp was Carl's choice pick. He said, "What are you doing at Bendiji?" My pronunciations are
Yeah,
horrible.
you're
Fair
good.
warning. But he said, "What are you doing there? Come to Denver. Come play some real hockey." And then Polkamp went to Denver and played some real hockey. I was even talking to collegiate clubs about guys like Eli Barnett and Colton Roberts. These
Hmm.
are late end picks for the Sharks. If we ranked their whole prospect pool, they might be near the bottom of the list, but they're gathering attention of hockey scouts at every level from around North America. And the strength, the gusto that gives a prospect pool who, again, is led by Macklin Celebrini. I mean, that is just incredible. I would have San Jose as the best pool in the NHL, and I think it would take, a few amazing additions for any other club to get anywhere close.
Sam Dickinson is going to be the biggest question heading into this draft, aside from whoever they draft at #2. Can Sam Dickinson play in the NHL next year?
Yeah, I think he can. Sam Dickinson is another fun one. We talk about San Jose wanting to add size, and we're talking about guys like Chernyshov and
Yeah.
Musty and Haltonen and Dickinson. These are all big boys. But Dickinson's an interesting one because he's used that size to his advantage really well. That's what got him drafted when he got drafted is his ability to be, kind of chubby almost and really use it to bounce forwards off of him, clear space in the corners in the defensive zone. And then, I mean, his puck handling and ability to drive it 200 feet has always been really special. What we saw from Sam Dickinson this year that makes me think he can be that NHL piece is his ability to use the offensive zone. Not a lot of defenders can use the O zone, but when you really know what you're doing, you're able to create space near the blue lines and then cut down the boards and find an opening somewhere by the hash marks to force the puck into the slot, or Dickinson strong enough on the puck that he can cut back up and run it back and do it all again and wait for an opening. Those are going to be the traits that he needs to lean on to be in the NHL next year. He's big, he's strong. Do I think he can be, a Leon Bixel in Dallas for San Jose next year? Well, I think he can sure try. But with Dickinson, you want that puck handling, you want the offensive generation. He really showed the instinct at the end of this season. He was maybe the most important piece of London's Memorial Cup win. And I only say maybe because I can't believe I didn't sing Casper Houghtonen's praises as well. What a player he is. He might be in the NHL next season. I mean,
That's the crazy thing is like when we were talking about the Sharks pool, you named a bunch of guys. There's just also
and I miss
Haltonen
one.
who has maybe the best shot out of anybody in their prospect pool.
Yeah.
His slapper is outrageous. He scored back-to-back hat tricks during that playoff run, and he's almost like, oh, we're going to throw him in. And
Yeah. Another
it's just
piece.
crazy the amount of talent they have. And yes, maybe we get down the road. I don't like to your point. I think they're all going to hit. I think, and maybe we're crazy. Maybe we're crazy to talk
You
about
might
it.
be.
But I also am old enough to know and understand that all these guys are not probably going to play for the San Jose Sharks long term. Like you just can't have all this talent and it's going to work out where you have 12 guys that you all drafted because also we're in a salary cap. And at some point,
Yes.
you're going to have to pay some players. So it's great problem to have at this point. Dickinson, the other thing about him is he's still a teenager,
Yeah.
but he's accomplished everything you need to accomplish. So to me, there's no other place for you to put him but to let him ride with the NHL club because what's the point of him going back to London and putting up another 150 or 120 or whatever it is,
Yeah.
over
You be
100?
modest.
Yeah, 100 points. And he just dominated again because he can't play in the AHL next year. He's not going to hit that age. So you almost have to ride him with the NHL club and let him learn kind of with Macklin and Will. I believe he's already signed his entry level deal, so he can't even go to the NCAA route, which is also a whole nother topic that maybe we can circle back to another time we bring you on, because that's a whole nother
Yeah.
topic of discussion
Later.
where now it seems like it's going to go CHL, NCAA, NHL. Like that's kind of the pecking order of what we're kind of seeing here. And I'd love to talk to you about that at another time because hopefully we have it. But when we're talking about Dickinson, there's just no other way. I just can't see him going back to juniors because I don't think it helps his development really at all. But that's me, and we'll find out. What they did with Macklin and Will is maybe the blueprint that I think the Sharks go with Dickinson. And with that being said, Macklin and Will very well because of their days in Chicago. Are you at all surprised? Not that they're hitting and not that they're developing the way that they are, but how quickly, when we were talking about Celebrini, like he was 17, came in 18, he was 18 all year. All year, he was 18 years old, and he's already developed out of the prospect pool. Like no one's including him in the pool because he's so good that he's like, oh, he's 18, he's going to be 19. He's already a bona fide number one center in this league. Will Smith is kind of still there, but if you put in the last 2 months of this season, he played the second best hockey on the team, and that was only behind Macklin Celebrini. These two kids are pushing this franchise forward, and the amount that you know them, you've seen them develop. Is it any surprise at how quickly it's happening?
Yeah, it is great to see. I don't know if it's a surprise, but it really warms my heart. Followed Mackey since he was with Shattuck St. Mary's, and he came into that program and right away wowed everyone. The poise, the responsibility, the maturity that Celebrini has had has been his defining characteristic ever since he joined, mainstay hockey conversation. And that's a big thing to say about a guy who just entered the league and scored 25 goals as an 18-year-old. It's his personality, his leadership, his poise that really drives him forward. And I think we saw that in how he played. He reached the heights that he did. He was able to bounce back from the injuries that he had because he has that poise, because he is determined, not only game to game, but shift to shift. He knows what he's out there to do. Will Smith, an interesting one. I think the thing that surprised me about these two is the relationship that they've formed. They are as close as could be, yin and yang there in the Sharks system. Will Smith has always been that kind of kid. He's fun loving, he's easygoing, he takes it day by day in a really good way. But he hit a lot of interesting struggles in the first half of this year. Struggles that almost made you think, is he an NHL player right now? Should we have left him in college? Should he be in the minors? I don't know. He looked timid in some aspects, and that surprised me too. Because even where Will Smith struggles, he knows how to find a way and he knows how to find a way quickly. And boy, was I happy to see that I was going to have to eat those words in the second half. He rebounded, he found ways. You can see that he's finding ways to be effective, not because he's necessarily learning what it takes at the NHL level. Certainly he is, but it's more so because he thinks about how he can make it work. He knows what he's good at. He knows he's good at manipulating the puck, manipulating space, and gaining tempo through the neutral zone. And in the second half of the year, we saw him leverage that. He was taking creative paths up the ice. He wasn't blazing to the end boards. He was taking moments to stop at the red line, stop at the blue line, make sure that his line mates were working with him or he had support. That's what made Will Smith special. Going back to his days at the national team, the US NTDP, everyone always had the sense that Will Smith was the special one on that locked in line of Gabe Perreault, Will Smith, and Ryan Leonard. Gabe Perreault's an incredible workhorse. Ryan Leonard's a bulky sniper, but Will Smith was the special playmaker, the cerebral mind that gelled it all together. And so I was surprised to see him slow at the start of the year and incredibly enthusiastic when I saw him light it up at the end of the year. Sky's the limit next year for Will Smith. Sky's the limit next year for Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini. I mean, how do you improve on a 63-point rookie season for Mackey there? It's an interesting tandem. I love to see the relationship that they've formed
Yeah.
because they really are two good kids, and that relationship's going to take them far.
And they were inseparable, and hopefully through this next decade they are inseparable, and they just continue to build on what they've already started here. And I think there's no other way they can do it is to push forward. And you saw their leadership, and they've been given the keys to the car, and they're gonna push this thing as far as they want to push it. They're gonna get some reinforcements here in number 2 overall pick. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about yourself and your journey into this thing. You're a younger guy, like 5, you're 24, 25 years old.
Yeah, 24. Yep.
24,
Nailed
and
it.
you're getting into this scouting world. It could be hard to break into any profession. So what's it been like as you tried to get your foot in here and kind of make a name for yourself in this scouting world where, let's be honest, most sports are a boys club, right? It's who you know
Mhm.
and how you know people. To make your mark, I'm fascinated to hear how you've kind of gone about trying to blaze your trail.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation and certainly one that I try to lead with humility about. But I grew up playing hockey. I started skating when I was 2 years old, and I was always around the Chicago and St. Louis pipelines here in Illinois. Grew up around guys like Tage Thompson, Lane Hudson up there in Barrington. Got to see him play at 11 years old, and let me tell you, he played the exact same kind of hockey. That's a special kid right there. Uh, growing up around these circles, I was quickly inundated with all the passion that comes for not just wanting to play hockey well, but wanting to do it with the right groups. Team Illinois, University of Michigan, Michigan State University, these teams that every Midwest kid aspires towards. In my own situation, I ended up working in journalism as young as 15 and quickly found my way into hockey reporting and did that alongside, my own playing for many years. And then, the arrow to the knee story that is so common. I got a few concussions, probably a few too many.
Yeah.
Kind of had to sit it out for a few years. And, that's tough. That's tough. I had to face, any USHL rumors turning into NAHL, that turning into an NA3 team saying, "Hey, well, if you want to play juniors, I guess you can." And and then, just kind of making the decision that, moving away and stepping away was right for me. But in doing that, I didn't lose any connections to my close buddies that were still blazing their own trails. The Central Illinois Flying Aces or the Bloomington Thunder were in the USHL right around the time that I decided to step away. So I stuck around USHL locker rooms, followed my buddies in their own journeys, followed San Jose Sharks prospect Igor Afanasiev in his own USHL journey. And it was through those connections, through those relationships that, well, I was a journalist. I knew how to write. I decided to start writing about my buddies. Decided to start writing, oh my gosh, Daniil Gushin, another
Yeah.
Sharks prospect. They're all here. What a
Yeah.
fitting place for me to land. But started writing about guys like Gushin, like Afanasiev, like Stephen Holiday over in Ottawa because I was around them. Then that turned into, the scouting reports that they turn into naturally. And once you kind of get your feet moving in the scouting world, I think it's quick to realize, this is a good way to get out, to vent these hockey feelings
Yeah.
that we all pent up. We all watch the game, and I'm sure so many of us watch it with such an analytical eye. I just started growing in my ability to express that analytical eye. And it's really that does it. I encourage all of the scouts that I work with now, all of the writers that I continue to mentor to just do it. Like
Yeah.
Nike says, just do it. Find a platform, even if it's an unpaid role, even if it's a small WordPress site. If you're putting your content out there, not only are you putting it in front of readers, even if it's 50, 100, 200 readers, that's impactful, but you're also honing your craft. You're sharpening your sword every article that you write, every report that you file, every game that you watch with the scouting hat on. You're sharpening your sword. And I think it's through sharpening my sword enough that I've been able to climb into, a head of scouting role with website Recruit Scouting. I've been able to do fantastic work like this podcast and like joining you, Alan, today. It's all exciting, it's all cumulative, and really it's all our own process of expressing that passion that you build from watching hockey for as long as, both of us, but I'm sure many of our listeners as well have.
What are some things that you think are key when you're looking at a player and something that you are non-negotiables when you're looking at how this guy might profile?
Yeah, it's interesting because it really does change depending
Hmm.
on what you're scouting for. And that is a thing that I think goes unheralded quite often, but scouting for the OHL is significantly different than scouting for the NHL. In the OHL, when you're watching a 15 or 16-year-old, you want to see if they know how to drive the puck up ice. You want to see how they're identifying where defenders are and manipulating that space. And then you want to see them putting in the work off the puck as well. How are these kids not only blazing their own trails, but utilizing their teammates, making dirty plays along the boards, making those simple decisions that add up and lead to a goal at the end of the shift. But when you're watching for NHL, that's the foundation. You
Hmm.
want to assume those pieces. You want a player who can make a simple play along the boards, who knows the value of flinging the puck into the slot if he has no other option. When you're scouting for the NHL, it really becomes cerebral. How are they identifying space in the circles in the offensive zone? Do they utilize their defensemen when space jams up too high up the ice? Are they back checking? Are they recognizing the defense, or are they just trying to push forward? And then the most important piece you mentioned, non-negotiables. To be a good NHL prospect, you have to be physical. You
Mm.
simply have to be. We're not drafting players into the NHL to develop into NHL players. We want the guys that we know will be NHL players. And to play in the NHL, you're going to get hit. You're going to get
Yeah.
hurt. You're going to have to go into the corners with a guy like, I don't know, Jacob Trouba and come out alive, come out to live the tale. So, physicality is the big non-negotiable. I'll mention a feature from this year's class who I'm lower on is Benjamin Kindle. You'll see Benjamin Kindle closer to 50 for me than you will see to 20. And that's because for all of his flash on the puck, for his outstanding ability to beat defenders one-on-one when he has the opportunity to, he's not physical. He
Mm.
shies away from play and he's quick to throw the puck away when a physical opportunity approaches, when a defender steps up on him. He also, waits for play to come to him rather than seeking it out. It's one thing to follow the puck head on 24/7, but you want these kids to put themselves in the position to receive the puck, to receive the momentum of play when it comes their way, not just sticking in their position and hoping that they end up involved. I think that's the determining factor between a guy like Ben Kindle and a guy like Riker Lee, who might not be physical as well, but he certainly put himself in positions to be the Madison Capitals' main player, their driving force in the USHL. I have Lee in my first, like I mentioned, I have Kindle in my second, and it's in distinguishing those two that I think you bring out a lot of the habits that, even if they don't lend themselves to sky high upside right now, will lend themselves to adjusting well to pro hockey when that opportunity comes along.
The the idea behind each draft pick and round and stuff is fascinating because I've learned over time where like when you're drafting a guy first overall and or it's not first overall, excuse me, the first round pick, you're trying to draft an NHL player, bottom line. That means 400 games played. That doesn't mean necessarily he's going to be a superstar. And I think some fans, when you look at where they're slotted, they automatically think, oh, first rounder, he's got to be a superstar. That's not how NHL teams look at it. That's not how scouts look at it. You're looking for NHL players. And at the bottom line, an NHL player is 400 games played in the NHL. And so I think that's another topic we can get into at another time. But when I first came around you, or when I first found out about you, is these player cards that I thought were awesome that came up on my Twitter feed. Call it X, call it Twitter, whatever. We're going to call it Twitter because
Yes.
that's what I refuse. I refuse to change over. But these player cards I think are great. And was this another way for you to kind of show your uniqueness in what you do? I know it's not like, I don't think, correct me if you're wrong. Did you create these or is it something that has been around that you kind of fine tuned and fixed?
No, these player cards are my own
Oh,
creation.
beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. For anyone maybe not aware, I created player cards right around early March that visualized a rate-based statistic in a variety of different things, expected goals, Corsi for, which is unblocked shots on net, entries and exits out of each zone. I pulled these into a rate because pulling them into a rate uh, levels the playing field for everyone. We're not asking what a player did in total, we're asking what they did per 60 or per 60 minutes of game time, the average runtime of a hockey game, certainly. Um, and then with the player cards, I think an interesting way to show uniqueness, an interesting way to flex my statistician muscle, which is always exciting to flex. But more than that, it's the visual. There are
Yeah.
no good visuals out there to show the variety. of things that prospects bring to the games that they play. I think these player cards were a great way to do it. I'll also give a kudos to Mitch Brown and Lassi Alanen at Elite Prospects. They do have similar playing cards, but their cards are hand tracked, which is simply too big of a bill for my order.
Yeah.
Incredibly impressive stuff. They watch, 9, 10 plus games for each player that they make cards for. My cards are video tracked. So it's a coding software that counts up each of these different things and adjusts them. Then I take that data, I manipulate it to that rate base, and I provide the visual. It's an interesting thing. I think it's a great way to see a snapshot of a player without assuming, how good they are. Because just because a player scores a lot doesn't mean they're good on defense and vice versa. So try to lift that up and trying to provide a little bit more brevity to a group that doesn't get it very often.
Yeah, I think the player cards are awesome. Probably going to show a couple just to give our listeners and viewers on YouTube some visual to see what it looks like. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep coming back to them. I think it's a great thing, and I hope for your sake it catches on because I think it's awesome, and I think you hear all these things whether it's good or bad, but you don't know what it means. And when you can look at it, I'm a visual learner. A lot of people are visual learners, so that's where it goes. Now we've kind of done a lot of hockey. We talked about your journey a little bit, getting to know you. But now on the mic is open portion of this podcast, we always have some dad advice. And you're a youngster, still on your way to maybe being a dad one day or not. It doesn't matter. I'm not here to tell people if they should have children. All I do tell them is you make that decision. Make sure you know it before you do it. And don't be like, I kind of want to have kids. Not kind of the thing you want to do. But you've been around a lot of hockey dads in your time, whether it's scouts, when it's your playing days, your buddies. So if you had advice for hockey dads or young ones that are going to have playing hockey, maybe they are great and they excel and they become awesome. Probably not, because that's like 0.5%, 1%.
Certainly.
But what would your advice be to hockey dads?
Yeah, I get approached by dads quite a lot in the rinks, especially over the summer, asking, what are you seeing? Where can my kid improve? And I'm happy to provide that feedback. I think engaging with parents is one of the most exciting parts of the job. It makes you remember where you started. It's in the rink. It's on the practice sheets, not even in the games. Those are the special moments. But I think I would encourage dads to do it alongside their kid. Be excited and take that excitement and use it to see what you want to see. If you watch your kid with the pride and the eagerness of just getting to see them play a sport that they love, you're naturally going to see where they can improve, where they can bolster their game, or maybe where their strengths are. And it's being excited in those pieces. It's having the eager conversations with your kid about, like, that game was awesome. You might have lost 6-2 or something, but you know what? You had a good shift here, here, and here. Or if they had a terrible shift, or a terrible game, leaving that game and saying, hey, it's all right. We'll get the next one. That excitement goes so far. It's motivation. It's a boost forward every time that you have it. It really is. If I can say, as a childless man myself, but I think it really is one of the joys of parenting in general, is being able to be excited, being able to do things alongside your kids. We all want our youngins to be everything that they can be, but it takes their own motivation, their own passion, their own determination to get there. And the best way to contribute to all three of those is to be proud, to be excited, to smile and pat your kid on the back and say, well, heck, you're a dang hockey player. You're a
Yeah.
hockey player, and I'm so proud of that fact.
I think it's great advice. And I think that goes with you're talking about hockey dads, but I think this is great advice for any father, mother who is watching their kid in a sport. Just let them have fun. Let them be themselves. Yes, when they get to a certain age, if they really are taking it seriously, maybe you're a little bit, harder on them a little bit. But overall, just be supportive of them. You don't have to be their coach unless you are their coach. Just support them. I don't think many kids want to hear their parent up there in the stands jeering the refs, being,
Yeah.
you just clap and just have fun. And if you're having
Smile.
fun, they're going to have fun. And I think that's great advice. Don't need to do too much with them, right?
If
Just
I
do
could
it. Yeah, go
throw
ahead.
something, because I know everyone loves tangibility as well. So if we want something tangible other than smile and be happy for your kid, which I think is defining, let's go with the three S's that
Okay.
they talk about in coaching all the time: skating, stick handling, and systems. That's what you want your kids to be good at if you want them to be good at hockey long term. Make sure
Hmm.
they can skate, make sure they're agile, make sure they know how to handle the puck and dish it out without staring down at it 24/7. Make sure they know their positioning, they know where to make decisions, they know how to make those decisions. Just something tangible that I wanted to throw out there in case we
Yeah.
have any
Have
dads
fun,
already excited.
supportive, and then when we get into X and O's, three S's, and I think you're going to be on your way because if you do that, those are the basics, and your kid can play as long as they want to play. And let's all be
Absolutely.
honest, parenting, be honest with your kids. Like only the 1% are going to be professional athletes. Only 5% or 2% are going to get scholarships. So just be honest with your children and figure out where they are, where their skill set is, and just have fun. Because at the end of the day, sports is so much more about what you're going to get out of it lucratively. You're going to learn a lot of skills that are going to take you far in life. So great advice for a father or a childless male in this world. But hey, I think it's still something that anybody should listen to. I had a great time chatting with you. I know this went on a little bit longer than we wanted, probably a lot longer than we wanted. So I apologize. So thanks for doing it. Gabe Foley, head of amateur scouting at Recruit Scouting, correct?
Yes,
Nailed that?
correct. Nailed it.
Nailed that. And where else can they find you? Those player cards. Tell us everywhere that our viewers and listeners now can get some of the most tangible and visual scouting evidence that is needed.
Absolutely. You'll find reports of over 20,000 words quite often at Recruit Scouting. I encourage everyone to check out my work there. You can also find me on Substack. I run a newsletter where I vent quite a bit. That is Foley on Hockey on Substack. And then check me out on Twitter. I'm not going to call it X either, but you can follow me on Twitter at NHL Foley. That's where you'll find my player cards. That's where you'll find my wild opinions about the hockey world, and that's where you'll find all my other work. So thank you, Alan. I appreciate the chance to plug, and an honor joining you today.
Yeah, and if you want to hear why James Hagen is number one on his list, that's on Substack. If you also want to hear why a defenseman should never go number one overall, also on his Substack.
All
So
of
here,
it.
just a little teasers, and that's how you can hear more. And again, those player cards. But I'm glad we did this. Hopefully, we could do this more often. Maybe we circle back and do something after the draft or as we go on. And like I said, that CHL NCAA merger, that is a huge topic that I think we should flush out here at some point. But I appreciate you so much. Let's do it again.
Beautiful. I'd love to.